Well, let's get this started here. Good evening, fellow Toastmasters. Any guests out there that aren't Toastmasters, welcome to the final session of the engagement room for 2025, session 8. So thank you so much for being here with us on this lovely, somewhat cold in some places, 17th of December. Tonight, we have a fantastic guest. He is a TEDx speaker. He is a multiple authored man. He's a podcaster, and he has lots of aspirations going on. Be also mindful that we are streaming at the same time on Facebook. There's a little delay, so if you're trying to look at both at the same time, don't watch your audio, please. So let's talk about our speaker tonight. Derek Zboran founded Triumph with Your Talk to help hesitant experts, silence creatives, and passionate enthusiasts find their confident voice. He blends positive psychology research with practical communication strategies to help people turn self-doubt into bold expression. Derek has spoken at TEDx, in Missouri S&T, authored 4 books, and hosts a podcast of his own. He is currently hosting a podcast called Jazz and Blues Infinity, and in the very near future, we'll be hosting one called Confident Creator with Derek Zboran. Tonight, the title of his presentation is called Ask Better Questions, Build Better Relationships. Harvard research shows that people who ask questions are perceived as more intelligent, more interesting, and more attractive. This presentation will give us the exact question types that create memorable conversations, as well as a way to make curiosity a habit. Ask better questions, build better relationships. Let's welcome Derek.
Thank you so much, Tim. I appreciate that wonderful introduction. And before we begin today, what I would like everyone to do is think to themselves, if I was to talk to somebody that I respect, maybe that would be somebody who's famous, or maybe that would be somebody that is not famous. It might be somebody who has passed away, or it could even be somebody who's not even born yet. Or it could be somebody that you talk to every single day and you would just like to ask them some more questions, just somebody you respect. I want you to picture that person. Can everybody picture a person that they respect? Everybody can picture that in their mind. Kind of seeing some heads nod in the room. And if you're listening to this or watching this somewhere else, I hope you can picture somebody that you respect. And again, it might not even be somebody it might be somebody famous that you're never going to talk to, or it could be somebody that you talk to every day. I want you to picture that person for a minute and pretend like you only have 2 minutes with them. You only have 2 minutes. How are you going to fill that space of 2 minutes? Are you going to tell them about you? Are you going to ask them questions? Are you going to share any insights? What are you going to do? And the reality is that when you're in that position of having to envision yourself speaking with somebody that you respect, we take that for granted, right? I mean, I was just talking to Tim and we were talking back and forth. We weren't talking like time was limited. When I was speaking with some colleagues earlier today, we were having a great time, and I wasn't even thinking, wow, this is limited time right here that we're spending. We go throughout our day, we have many interactions, but we don't always realize how sacred that time is. You know, time is passing. We talk to people every day, but we don't always think about how do we fill that time. What I want you to do, or how I want to frame this idea of asking better questions to build better relationships, is think about all the relationships in your life right now. And we'll return to that before we're over with today. But I want you to think about that right now is, what do you think you want from the relationships in your life? And think about the interactions you're having now, or that you might like to have, or that you would have if you knew certain people. What would that look like? And so just keep that in the back of your mind. Before we go further on that, I want to share with you a dirty little secret. So I did a master's degree in communication, has specialization in marketing and new media. And you see all those social media platforms there on that slide, and maybe you've interacted with some of those. Maybe some of those you like, maybe some of those you really don't like, and maybe some of them you're just kind of, it's helpful, but I could do without it, or I need it for this, but it does a lot of harm too, that kind of a thing. Whatever your thoughts are about that, I spent about 2.5 years studying those platforms and studying how marketers use them and studying how professionals use them to grow their sphere of influence, build their personal brand, grow their companies, etc. And I want to take you back to an assignment I had. And the assignment was to go network, right? How many people here have thought to myself, I probably should be networking more? Anybody ever think that to themselves? Anybody think I should be networking more? Yeah, I see some hands up there. And if you're watching this from afar, you're probably, yeah, I've heard that. I've maybe even tried that. Well, I had a class where the whole point of the class was just to build that foundation of networking. And the very first step for that class was get a LinkedIn account and start doing things on the LinkedIn account. And the assignment, it was years ago when I did this, but the assignment, as I remember it, was create your LinkedIn account, come up with some kind of mission statement, and then go invite or send connect requests out to like 5 people that you respect. So think of those 5 people. And one of them was supposed to be somewhat famous, or not necessarily famous, but somebody who had a reputation in the field you wanted to work in. Now, at that time, I was interested in working in helping college students with their stress levels, and I was doing that myself. I was, managing my own stress as a college student, and I was creating content around how college students could reduce their stress through effective coping strategies and through effective time management, and etc. So I had this individual, his name was Thomas Frank, and he's a big, if you Google him back in the day, he was a big like author, blogger, podcaster type person for college students. I believe his podcast was called College Info Geek. Successful speaker, successful entrepreneur in the space of helping college students manage their time better. And so I crafted my LinkedIn profile, and I thought to myself, who better to send a friend request to or connect request to than Thomas Frank, right? So I got my LinkedIn profile set up, and then I went over to Thomas Frank and I wrote a message to Thomas through LinkedIn, right? Because they said, don't just send the connect request, write a little message to go with it, right? So I went and I wrote the message to go with this connect request. I figured, well, I better not hit the connect button first. I better write the message first, because you might reject it if I just send the connect. So let me send the message first, and then I'll hit the connect button. So I opened up the chat box and I started writing. And I wrote a message that I thought was good at the time. It actually was terrible, but I thought it was good at the time. And what I wrote was, hey, Thomas, I love your blog. Here are some things I'm working on that connect exactly to what you're doing. I'm doing blah, 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 and I'm doing blah, 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 and I'm doing blah, blah, blah. As you can see, like you, I am interested in helping blah, blah, blah. I would love to connect with you. I have sent you a request. Thank you. And then I hit the send button. I connected, but I didn't really connect. And that's why I didn't hear anything back from Thomas ever. Right? That was never heard back from Thomas. And I think all of us in our own ways, we've had that struggle of, well, we're doing all the right things, and yet people aren't connecting with us. There's a failure of communication going on because we aren't connecting. We're doing all the right things. We're on the right platforms. We've got our pretty pictures up on the circle. We're writing messages to people, but they're not listening and they're not connecting with us. What I really discovered, though, through that assignment, and by the way, I submitted that assignment. I got a 90% of like an A minus, and the teacher was like, good job, right? And nothing more, because he didn't really have an answer beyond the basics. The reality and what I learned, the dirty little secret of all these stupid social media platforms, which I use, I'm not use them. They're great tools. But the problem with social media platforms is they don't really promote connection. They promote you kind of just being out in the middle of the internet planet, planetary system, and you're just there on your own little planet, and other people are on their planets, and you're just kind of screaming into the void, and you're frustrated because other people aren't connecting with you, right? It's a really frustrating thing. And the reality is if you really want to build connection with people, you have to start with questions. See, the mistake I had made with Thomas, I had followed all the right rules, but what I had done was I put me first and I didn't give him the chance to have a conversation. The reality was is he was an established creator and I was like not creating anything. I was in school. He has no reason to be interested in what I'm doing. Zero interest in what I'm doing, and for the right reasons. He's a busy guy. And what I realized was that's not the appropriate way to reach out to people that you don't know and to build your sphere of influence beyond who you do know. You have to start by creating a space, much like Tim has done here with this space. You have to create a space where people can ask questions and start building a relationship based on curiosity. Now, I want to point your attention to a quote from a guy by the name of Keith Ferrazzi. He wrote a book called Never Eat Alone. If you've ever been into the networking thing, it's kind of the go-to Bible for entrepreneurs who want to build their sphere of influence or build their connections. And he made a statement in that book that has always really stuck with me. And he was reflecting about his own social network and his own challenges at building connections with others. And he wrote that poverty wasn't only a lack of financial resources, it was isolation from the kind of people that could help you make more of yourself. When we think of connection, it's not just something that we do to pass the time. It's not something we do as career points. It's not something we do to get a raise. All those things are the side benefits. That connection that we're talking about is a form of enrichment into our lives, and it helps us make more of who we are, more of who we are. I began to practice that with something called Jazz and Blues Affinity. Now, Tim mentioned that in his introduction of me. And Jazz and Blues Affinity was where I really started doing connection, networking the right way. And the reason it was kind of the right way was because I was actually not trying to do networking. I was just trying to connect with other people on the basis of curiosity. Now, I'm here in Rolla, Missouri. This is a fairly rural area, except for we have a university here. I happen to be work at that university now, but it's a fairly rural location. And frankly, I had this bit, as you can probably tell from the title of that podcast, I had an interest in jazz and blues. However, there weren't many people in this community who liked jazz and blues. In fact, of all the people in the actual community that I knew of, it was like only my dad who liked jazz and blues. Nobody else. So I really had nobody to talk to about this interest. And I had this burning interest in it. Wasn't particularly interested in trying to monetize it. Wasn't particularly interested in trying to turn it into a career. I was just curious about this topic and about the people in the community. And I thought to myself, what if I downloaded one of those free softwares? I chose Audacity. What if I downloaded one of those free softwares, bought a simple mic, and just started podcasting about this? What if I just sent emails out to some of these musicians I follow? What would happen if I did that? So I started Jazz and Blues Affinity. And as you can see from this slide here, I asked multiple different kinds of people within the community. So on towards the far left, you can see Chloe Fioranzo and Bob Corritor. Those are two musicians. One was more jazz. Chloe's more the jazz person. Bob is more blues. But I invited people like that on the show. So these are established musicians. They have followings. They've done great things. I don't know if I'm sure they've won awards of their own sort. They're very successful in their field. You can go look these people up and you'll find videos and albums and great collaborations, etc. In the middle, you see that individual named Chuck Haddix. That's a researcher. And that's just somebody who wrote books and he had dedicated his life to studying the music. So in this case, he was actually interested in jazz and blues within the Kansas City area, Kansas City, Missouri. And he became a student of that, and he spent decades researching it. And he ended up writing the definitive biography of Charlie Parker. If anybody here has seen the movie Kansas City, I believe he was the historian in that room, so to speak. So he was the consultant to make sure that it was somewhat historically accurate. Robert Altman directed that film, Kansas City, 1996, I believe is when that was released. And he also wrote a book about Kansas City jazz. So he's in the research side of jazz and blues community. And then off to the very far right, you see a guy by the name of Chris Gingrich. I don't know if Chris may even watch this. We're friends on Facebook. Hi, Chris, if you're watching this. Chris Gingrich, I believe his small business is actually owning a security camera company, right? He's not he's not a professional musician. He's just somebody in the community he plays trombone, and he also teaches his son, or he was teaching his son at the time, how to play music, and it was like music education within the family household as a way to help grow his son's ability to connect with the world around him, right? And this was just a friend I had, right? He's like the funniest guy on Facebook I know. He avoids all the drama, usually, and it's more just about having fun. And he's always writing silly things under my Facebook post, and I write silly things under his. I actually met him through my old boss at the library. So, just kind of one of those chance acquaintances you make, and just a really great guy. And I invited him on the show because I knew he played trombone, and we had a great interview. So as you can see, I created this space called Jazz and Blues Affinity. I used the simple technology to get people connected. And then what I did was I invited people into that space. I invited the professional musicians. I invited researchers. I invited friends. And I asked them questions. I asked them questions that, from a place of curiosity, again, this wasn't to monetize, this wasn't for a career move. This was just out of curiosity and love for the topic and connecting with other people who loved it too. And in creating that space of connection, we were able to, I was just able to just forge these connections with people I wouldn't otherwise have been able to forge. Right. And in the case of Chris, who I'd already known, I was able to deepen that and actually learn things about his life that I had not known before. Now, before we get to that, I want you to stop here and think for yourself for a moment. What is something you care about? Can everybody here, and if you're here in the Zoom room, could you raise your hand if you can think of something that you would like to talk more about? Not necessarily to monetize, but it could be that, but something you'd just like to talk more about. Can anybody think of something they would like to talk more about? Tim can think about something. Rhonda's like, I wonder if I should say what I came to my mind. uh, Sandra, Sandra's a writer, so she undoubtedly has things she could talk about. It could even be about yourself, things about your life. Yeah, I see lots of laughing. I see thumbs up. I see heads nodding. The reality is you probably have a space that you can create about a topic. And even if you don't, we're going to talk about that towards the end. But what I want to suggest to you is I want you to think about something that you care about or somebody you care about, and how can you ask them questions from a place of curiosity. And today's presentation is going to go through very quickly because we don't have much time. 5 tools you can use, or 5 question types that you can use from a place of curiosity to create connections with people. Again, I connected with musicians, researchers, friends, and I was able to do that because I used some of these tools. By the way, if you're wondering where these tools came from, most of them came from the field of journalism. Again, I did a master's degree in communication. I studied that area a lot, and I realized that a lot of the tools that journalists use, good journalists, not the crappy ones, but the good ones, good journalists actually use a lot of cool tools that help us to connect with other people. And so to start with, let's think about this or that. This or that is when you ask somebody, would you do this, or would you prefer this or that? So for example, if I was to ask a jazz musician a question from a place of curiosity, I might ask them, would you rather perform this thing live, or would you rather perform it in a studio? And when I ask a musician that, what do they have to do? They have to think about, well, what would I do? And then they have to defend that answer. And when they defend their answer, guess what they're doing? They're connecting with me based on the frame I presented. So there's the connection part. And they're also sharing their perspective with me. We talk all the time about caring about other people's perspectives, and then we spend our entire lives not giving a crap about other people's perspectives because there's not a space for us to do that. But when we have a podcast, we can create a space where it's safe for me to ask somebody about something that they care about their perspective, and for them to share that honestly with me. A second question type that we can do is the what if. You see there's that stick figure, and he's, or she, he, whatever, is thinking about the future, or he's thinking about something, and there's nothing in there though. When we ask somebody what if blank, you're forcing somebody to envision what the future or what the past or what if anything, what if is a broad statement. It could be about the past, could be about the future, it could be about the now, could be about what would happen if you were to play on Carnegie Hall at Carnegie Hall, or what would happen if you had not met Dizzy Gillespie, right? If you're in the jazz world like I was. But you're asking somebody what if blank, and the point of that is you're getting them to again bring out their perspective. They're in a space that's safe for them to share their perspective, and they feel connected with you. Share your perspective with them with that what if question. What if blank? I don't know what you might have a conversation about, but try this out sometime. Ask somebody, what do you think about this? What if this was to happen? And see what they come up with. Sometimes people are gonna tell you something kind of dark. Sometimes people are gonna tell you something really positive. Sometimes people are gonna say something that's just comes to their mind. Any of those things give you their perspective. Really quickly, you said X, but how about Y? You said this thing, but what about Y? And that, if it's done in a non-confrontational way, again, forces them to defend their perspective. And then finally today, the fifth kind of question I would share with you is the time machine. And the time machine is where you take somebody on their timeline and you say, what would past you do, or what would future you do? I like the past you. And so when I'm doing an interview, often if you go listen to some of my interviews, I will tell people, hey, if 18-year-old you could give you advice, what would 18-year-old say? Yeah. And if you force them, I love that question, because by this time, and I always save it for the end, and the reason why is because when you've built connection with somebody and they're safe sharing things with you, asking them what they would tell their young self as they just turned into an adult is a powerful way for them to connect with you, and for them to share some meaningful insight from their perspective. All right. So bringing all of this together, I see the red card is going to be coming soon. So what I want to share with you in this final remaining moments is think about bloom where you're planted. I know a counselor, I'm friends with a counselor, and one of the things he likes to tell people is bloom where you are planted. So instead of thinking to yourself, well, I could have a podcast, I could do this, I could do that. Don't even start there. I want you to think about your own life the way it is now, at work, in church, at Toastmasters, wherever you want. And think to yourself, how can I use these questions in the place I am now? Take any one of these areas, okay? The this or that, what if, how, you said X, but how about Y, time machine? Take any one of those. Ask that question to somebody who's meaningful to you. And then follow up with another question. And then follow up with another question. And then follow up with a third question. Okay, that's called going down 3 levels. So you start with one of these basic questions, right? And then you ask them a deeper question. You have them go deeper. Ask them another question that causes them to go a bit deeper. And ask them another question that causes them to go a bit deeper. This takes intentional listening and active listening, but the reward to you is that you will practice your curiosity. And I promise you, if you make a deliberate habit of asking specific questions in a respectful way, allowing people the space to share their perspective, and then asking them questions that help them to go deeper, you will bloom in curiosity, and that will help you to build better relationships in your life.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you so much. Let me remove the pin here where we can go ahead and get to the full forum here. Yes, thank you so much. That was fantastic. Let's give our the last speaker of 2025 another round of applause. Thank you so much, Derek. Gotta let Patty in here. Yeah, definitely. Definitely, definitely. All right then. So now we get into the area that most of us Toastmasters really never have a chance to exercise is our questioning skills. We're always evaluating, but we can't really ever ask any questions. So now, who would like to ask the first question? Raise your hand. Anyone? Sandra, go ahead.
What is the most unique answer you've received from those questions?
I've heard some very unique answers to questions. Typically, in a way, Sandra, all of the questions that I've ever gotten, or all the answers I've ever gotten to questions I've asked, have been unique in their own ways. And the reason why is because they're never quite what I think they're going to be. If I had to pick that one answer that I can think of, so just going back to that interview with Chloe Fioranzo, I asked a question about if you could go back in time and give your 18-year-old self advice, what would you say? And what was kind of surprising or unique to me is I heard dead silence. You feel how uncomfortable that is? That dead silence of no, and I was just like, oh, I wonder if maybe I shouldn't ask that question. See, I have a lot of the anxiety, so immediately the anxiety thing kicked in. I was like, oops, shouldn't have done that, Derek. And actually, it took her about a minute to think of an answer, and then she came up with a beautiful answer that said, I'm going to tell her that it's going to be really hard, but it's going to be okay. And that created a connection with the audience, and that created a connection with me. And that was, I asked her that question in a place where it was safe for her to give that perspective. Again, you have to, the unique answers that you really like, you got to sometimes ask those questions toward the end of a conversation because you need people to feel safe talking with you first. But I would say that silence, that long silence, made me really uncomfortable. And it was kind of unique because it was just a long amount of silence. I really started to doubt myself. But then she came up with that really good answer. So that's what I would say in answer to that question. That was a great question, too. Thank you, Sandra.
Yes. Thank you, Sandra. Okay, who's our next person? Karen?
Well, first of all, thank you for the great presentation, Derek. I appreciate it. So one of the things that sometimes when you ask someone a question, they're in their head. There's a lot backstory in their own mind.
Mhm.
How do you deal with if someone either goes off on a tangent when you ask a question or becomes defensive in the moment?
Mm-hmm. Great question. So there's kind of two parts to that question. The first part is related to them going off on tangents. I will say, as a podcast host, that was one of the things I've been criticized about from listeners. Should you actually let people have that much space to talk about themselves? Why don't you intervene a little bit more? So that might be a growth area for me. And in terms of, I probably let people talk too long. In terms of how I have done it in the past, when I have done it, it has been to think about my why for asking them to be there. So each person, before I invited them to be on the podcast, I actually made myself write a one sentence statement saying, why do I want this person on my podcast? A lot of podcasters and a lot of people who have these kinds of conversations or networking, they tend to think about things very transactionally. And they're thinking about, I want this person because they have an audience, and I think I might have an audience too if they come on my show. Or if you're networking, you might say to yourself, I want to be connected with that person because they have a lot of friends and followers and I want to be in their social circle. So we're thinking very transactionally about those things. But I have a very clear why about why I ask people. And so when they go off on those tangents, I can begin to reframe and interrupt and pick up things that they've said to bring them back to the purpose of why they're there. So that's the first part of an answer to your question. The second part, in terms of defensiveness, I won't lie. If I don't like somebody, I don't invite them on my podcast. And when they get on the podcast, Rhonda's laughing. It's true, though. If I don't like somebody, I don't invite them on the podcast. This is not me being an activist. This is not me getting people on the hot seat. I don't, people are on the hot seat too much. That's why we're all stressed out all the time. We're always trying to like protect this image to people. I want people to feel safe and unwind in my space. And the way you do that is I only invite people that I respect and that I'm willing to respect. And I would like to say that I'm one of those people that can just respect anybody who comes in the room, and I could ask them questions that don't put them on the fence. I'm probably not that much of a saint. I'm trying to be good at that, like everybody, but I'm probably not 100% perfect at that. I try to only invite people where I'm not going to make them defensive because there's no reason to be. And the second thing to that point, without going off on a tangent, otherwise you'll have to rein me in, I would say build rapport with your with the person first by asking simple questions. And one of the easiest ways to do that, instead of asking somebody who you barely know, hey, what would what would you tell your 18-year-old self about the mistakes you've made in your life? Right? I wouldn't start an answer like that to somebody just in the start of the conversation. I build rapport first. So I spend 30 minutes or even an hour and I ask them questions, and I'll start with questions like, hey, because I'll do my research. And so I'll go on their social media platform and I'll see something that they're proud about or a hobby that they love. And I'll ask them about that. Just very low level questions, very simple questions. Hey, I saw your dog. How long have you had your dog? Hey, I saw that you got 2 million views on your latest video. How does that feel? Something that reaffirms them, something they're already bragging about. Create the rapport first, have them share their perspective and feel safe sharing their perspective. And then when you ask those questions that really require them to be vulnerable, they won't be as defensive.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Linda's our next question. Linda?
Mine's not necessarily a question, but as I've been listening to you, you have been asking questions of us that have caused me to interact with the ideas you are presenting. And I already have in the back of my mind different people and different topics and different ways to interact with you. So I can see this really works. At least it has worked for me, because it caused me to think about things from a different perspective with these. I had 3 or 4 people written down and I wrote some topics. And I hope to follow up with this and experiment to see how it works for me. It has been very informative, this asking the question and giving appropriate time to think about it before, and not necessarily respond and then go to the next level. Thank you for this information. It is excellent.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that. I will follow up with just another question for you to consider. And you don't have to answer it, but of your list, think of that one person you can practice with, and think of one question you might start with. And remember to use your rapport. Remember, don't just come and slap them with a question, right? Think about, you use your manners, do things like how was the weather today? Blah, blah, blah. Make the small talk. But then think to yourself, what's a question I could ask them? And then listen to what they say and ask those follow-up questions. And I think you're going to find it a really joyful process. And the person you're talking to is going to feel really joyful too, because you created a space for them to share their perspective.
Definitely. Thank you. Yes, Sandra.
I've been admiring your voice since you got on. You have a tonality that feels safe. Is that something you worked on, or is just part of your nature, or a little of both?
Well, you should hear me at some points in my life, because I'm anything but calm and safe. I work in higher education. We just got off of the fall semester. So anything but safe. But no, I appreciate that. Yes, I have worked on that. One of the ways I practice that is I do work in higher education. I work in well-being, and I'm constantly talking to people who struggle with their well-being, and they need a safe space to come speak. So I have learned that sometimes you have to be careful about the tone of your voice when you're even speaking with people like that. You have to speak gently. You have to reassure people with how you speak that this is an okay conversation to have with somebody that they might be afraid of a little bit. Because, I work for the university. It's credibility, right? It's also a person of authority, and it puts people off, right? Especially people who are 18, 19 years old. They're learning about confidence still, right? In terms of, you're probably, who here knows Mr. Rogers, right? Okay, so I grew up with Mr. Rogers as reruns. And during COVID 2020, they locked down the library, and something called virtual story times became a thing. And that was where people, library people people who worked in libraries would read stories to the children that they used to read stories to inside the library. And all of us who were working at a library, I used to work at the Rolla Public Library, we adopted these shticks, right? Or these personas. And I chose Mr. Rogers. So I actually went out and I bought the yellow, and you can go research. If you type in Rolla Public Library in the YouTube, you can go find Derek as Mr. Rogers. I had absolutely no facial hair. I looked like I was 12. I probably had braces on. And it was kind of a cool thing to when I reflect back on it. But I studied Mr. Rogers, and Mr. Rogers, one of the big things about him was he talked gently, he talked softly, and he created that space with his voice for people to feel safe in the space. All kinds of kids, right? I mean, there was kids from bad backgrounds in his community. There were kids that didn't look like him from his community. And yet they all felt safe in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. And the reason why was because he was very intentional to be create that space where people felt like they could, hey, this is just Mr. Rogers, right? I don't have anything to prove. It's just Mr. Rogers.
No, that's very important. And see, that brings up questions of tone and body language and things like that. Something that we as public speakers and leaders are thinking about all the time. So can you give us some perspective on some studies of tone and body language that has brought you to where you are with podcasting and then also working with well-being at Rolla?
Yeah, absolutely. It started by doing it really badly publicly for me. And I could take you back to my very first public speaking class. And I had to make it on a video because it was a virtual class. And I recorded that first video, and I stood here like this, and I was really scared of the camera. And I was actually more like this, right? Because I was like far away. I didn't realize that you have to actually own the space of the frame. So I was like over here. I was like, hi, my name is Derek Zboran. I really don't want to be here, but I have to do this video. Right. So I was talking too fast. I was at the upper register talking too fast, not taking time to use pauses, not inflecting the words. The words really had no meaning. And he came back with, man, you said a lot of good words, but you are awkward. You gotta do something about that, boy. You're awkward. And so what I took away though from that was you gotta practice in little ways your voice and make progress over time. That was 10 years ago when I did that. And I have progressively gotten better only through doing it badly publicly. Another thing, if you're really brave and you want to study this in a way where you can really improve quickly, try learning how to sing a song. And I dare you to even sing the song and put it up on YouTube on your personal channel. And a lot of you are like, I would not do that. But if you did it, which I have done it, and it was a song called, Bill Withers recorded it, and I can't even remember the song. It was Ain't No Sunshine When She's Gone. That
You
was
are
the
a
song.
bold man.
I
You
went
are a bold man.
I went and I recorded that sucker, and I had my little microphone, and I was skinny little me standing there, and I worked with a coach. It was a voice coach, and I worked with that coach, and she said, Derek, I really want you to practice your range. And I actually don't have much of a range. But the thing is that there's enough of a range where I can have some variety. And I can take time to enunciate words correctly. Because that was another thing. Bad tone often means you don't pronounce words quite correctly, or it's really smudged. It makes it difficult for people to understand, especially if you're on a podcast. If you're in a big room, you can kind of get away with that better than when you're on a podcast, because the flubs really show up on a podcast. Because people have those earphones right next to their ear, and they're listening to exactly how you're saying words. So learning how to sing a song and learning about range and just practicing vocal exercises really went far for me. Another thing you can do if you really just want a simple way to start this, do the trills. So that's just like blowing your, like, has anybody ever done like a raspberry to somebody you didn't like, or you know, yeah, do the, yes, Rhonda's got it right. Okay, I'm not here on Zoom, so I can see Rhonda doing it. Do that, but this time it's happy. You're not angry at somebody. You're not trying to prove something. You're just exercising the lips and exercising the mouth. Finally, drink tea, not coffee and not soda. If you drink a really sugary drink, or if you drink coffee, it tends to parch the throat. It makes things difficult. If you drink tea, it's much better. I have tea in this cup right now.
Cool. All right. Well, you do get A pluses for intentionality. You really, really do. All right. Who's our next question or person for the questions? Rhonda, you got anything? Josephine? I cannot believe Rhonda Green doesn't have a question. Patty, do you have anything? Or Melissa or Yo?
Rhonda Green has no fear of speaking.
No, of
I've
course
been with
not.
Toastmasters for 19 years. I have gotten given so many speeches, got so much feedback, and I took that feedback to make the speaking better.
It's the only way to do it.
And I practice that singing thing. I love to sing. I can sing a cappella. I cannot sing with a group. Okay. But I used to practice singing, this, that, and the
Beautiful.
other, because it helps work, like Derek said, it works on your tonality, on reaching those different ranges and things. Because when you speak, everybody knows that when you give bad news, you use a soft voice
Yes.
when you're giving bad news. So I practice all of that with my Toastmasters clubs on a regular basis, so I get my $60 worth. Okay.
Well, on top of that, I am from Minnesota, and when I moved to California, I got a lot of wisecracks about my accent
Mhm,
and how nasal I sounded.
mhm.
My first Toastmasters meeting, someone came up to me and says, if you want to fix that nose, talk to your toes. And so she had me put a piece of paper on the ground between my feet, and I had to read it. And all of a sudden I noticed my voice going down. It wasn't up here anymore, and it wasn't here at all. That was one of the reasons I joined Toastmasters, was because someone was willing to help me, and in a nice way. And I really appreciate, as I mentioned, your tonality. You build a safe environment in your voice. And I think a lot of it is your deliberate slowness, not slowness, but pacing and pausing, because you know better than I, as a professor, how the brain works and has to sort words and define words and figure out what you're saying as fast as you're saying them. And sometimes that's hard, especially with long 3 or more syllable words that you professors like to use.
Yes, it can be very difficult. And I have actually had students, rightfully, by the way, correct how I pronounce words. And that is very embarrassing for an English teacher. So if you want to save yourself, if you ever plan to be an English teacher, make sure that you know how to pronounce every word you're about to say. Rhonda's got a thought. Rhonda, tell me how I should actually treat these kids.
No. Okay, I'm from Texas. I have a slang. I don't say going, I say going. And no matter how many times Toastmasters tell me you're leaving off the G's, I go, uh-huh. And I keep leaving that G off, because that's something that's Southern. That's part of me. I don't want to be like everybody else. Okay? So when it comes to your tone, exactly how do you pronounce words depends on how you were raised and where you are from. Nobody wants to be perfect. Ed Tate, world champion of public speaking, said he got rid of all of his odds, arms, and everything, and found out because he was so perfect, he was losing his audience. It's okay to correct your grammar, correct how you pronounce things, but you have to remember, you still have to maintain yourself, who you are. And who you are is reflected in how you speak.
And that's especially notable and important for storytelling. because if anyone wants to speak on different levels of tone, or if you're trying to emphasize specific types of situations, it's good to bring out the drawl. My drawl from being from Tennessee is not what it used to be, but living in Chicago and Pennsylvania beat it out of me, but pretty much, you know, anytime you ever read something like, say, like by Mark Twain or whatever, you're going to hear him speak in your head.
Yes.
You're going to hear that come out depending on how it's written.
Yes.
So it's yeah. I mean, it's important. I mean, we have to stay true to ourselves on that.
Absolutely.
Karen had a question about your podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, where can you find your podcast?
So the best way to do that is go to either www.jazzandbluesaffinity.com, and you can see the old episodes that I recorded for that project. Again, that was very much like just a, what can I do with this kind of a project? And the second place you can go is www.confidentcreatorpodcast.com. And that is where you can find the podcast I'm going to be focusing on starting in January. You'll see some episodes there. I haven't launched it yet. If you want to go see it when it's in its ugliness being born phase, you can go listen to it. I have some episodes already up there, but it's not going to be technically launched until January 1st. Once you get to January 1st, it's going to look all beautiful. But right now, it's just kind of in its development stage. I like to do things the messy way. I like to get in, get things done, see what's working, see what's not. So I've spent a couple months building that up. But that's going to be the space that I'm working on in 2026. So those are the two links. And I just
Can you
say
put those in the chat so that we
absolutely,
okay, thanks.
absolutely. And something
Actually, Karen, I can get that from him, and I will put that on the Facebook page where the edited live will be, and I will make sure that those are out there so everyone can grab it.
Thank
that's
you.
perfect.
That way I can promote Derek's efforts, and we can do that. We lost Yo. She had to go. Her camera was having trouble. So,
Oh, no.
and then Patty also says, "Thank you, Derek, for sharing tonight. And what you learned is play Mr. Rogers." I think she's on audio only as well.
Thanks,
So,
Patty.
yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. I have books about Mr. Rogers. That's another thing. Think about speakers that you like or leaders and read their biography. Learn about what they made, how they made it, learn about the struggles of it. You'll find that usually a good story or a person that you admired, you're going to find things like, wow, I don't know if they should have done that. Or, wow, they weren't actually a perfect person. That's okay. You'll learn that you can start where you're at and grow into your unique voice. I really liked Sandra and Rhonda's kind of yin and yang thing going on there with one was like, I really appreciate that people tell me how I can improve, and then I improve by applying the feedback. And I really appreciate also Rhonda pointing out, hey, sometimes I'm going to speak the way I want to speak, and I don't really care that you don't like that. And I think both of those things are really good. The way I do this is I like to think of it as a mirror. So and you will get feedback on your podcast. Even if it's only 30, 40 listeners, you will 100% get feedback on your podcast. And think of it as a mirror. And sometimes you're going to resonate with the critique and say, you know what? I do really want to grow in that area. They have a point. And other times you're going to say to yourself, I'm sure they're a good person, but they're really impeding upon my autonomy and they're impeding upon what my voice is. So actually I can't follow that advice because that's who I am. And it's learning the both sides of that. But either way, it's a mirror. Because they're using their standards to give you feedback. Now, I'll give you an example of feedback I was given once that I think those of you who are Toastmasters watching this will particularly appreciate. I used to use the filler word all the time. It really stemmed from not liking silence. I was scared to death of silence. And when I learned how to be like Miles Davis, who's a jazz trumpet player, he said, use the silence. If you listen to those records, one of the reasons they were so innovative in the jazz world is because he let spaces just have nothing. While the band was playing, he would just have spaces of silence. And that didn't take away, but it added things to the composition. So definitely feel free to, listen to advice when it's applicable, because I have gotten feedback that I've incorporated. But I've also, an example of feedback where I was like Rhonda and I was like, don't tell me what to do is is when somebody told me, you know, you really don't have very famous people on your podcast. I think you would be more successful if you got people who were number ones on the Billboard chart.
Wow.
And I think they meant that from a good place. But the reality was I was interviewing exactly who I wanted to interview.
That's
And
exactly right.
that connections I was creating with people was the reward of that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the reasons why this was created, because to have people give them an outlet to speak a little longer or more, have more options than maybe they would normally have. Patty she said, one project I've always enjoyed is reading a story like you're reading it to grade school students. It also helps you develop your tone and pace. Very important in storytelling. Definitely.
That's what I did
Definitely.
with Mr. Rogers. I
Oh,
also
yeah.
did puppets. And that was
Oh,
a real.
wow.
I was scared of that, and I wasn't good with puppets in the sense that like I would talk and I would just have my mouth moving and I would have the puppet's mouth moving, but that was how Mr. Rogers did it, so I felt somewhat comfortable doing it that way. And you will, if you have the courage to do that on a video camera, you will explore your voice. Like I had the shrill voice and I had the soft voice and I had the scared voice. I had a whole cast of characters. I had a princess, and then I also had a turtle, and I had a cowboy dog. And I had all the in fact the cowboy dog probably was not completely politically correct. But I did the cowboy dog anyway, even though I did a very hyped up almost stereotypical voice for that. But I was trying to explore my voice in all these different areas with the different characters. And when you do that, you learn what your voice is capable of outside the normal monotone voice.
It's funny, I wanted to be a ventriloquist when I was a kid.
Such a cool thing to do.
I used to watch Lamb Chop with Sherry
Oh,
Lewis.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And my
Definitely.
mother put it down for years and years and years, says you'll never make money that way. But about 4 years ago, she gave me a lamb chop for Christmas and said, go for it. And that
Beautiful.
was so dear and to my heart to have her validate a childhood dream, which I wouldn't have been any good at, but it was something I wanted to do and I found enjoyable. And I do love listening to the pacing of someone telling a story because the pauses put weight where you need time to think. And
Mhm.
then the faster talk gives you that energy, that adrenaline, and all. Using your voice can be so key. And I love to mentor Toastmasters. And the one thing that I talk to them about is being believable
Mhm.
and just talking, but not flats,
Mhm.
but talking. Don't what's the word? Dramatize
Right.
your words. Be real with them. And but I think I might pick up my little lamb chop tonight and practice.
I'm excited that you are inspired to do that based on our conversation, because that is all part of creating that space for curiosity. People talk about curiosity all the time. They talk about, hey, it's important to hear other people's perspectives all the time, but they don't really know how to do it. I think the curiosity unlocks it, but there's so many tools available to us. And one of them is how we approach people with our voice. You know,
Yes.
if I had talked to Tim and I had been like, Tim, I got slides to share. Do you have capability for me to share the slides? Right. Immediately that would have created all kinds of defensiveness just because of the tone of my voice.
Hmm.
It didn't even matter if that wasn't what's going on in my inside. Right. And that's
Right.
just an example. You can do this all the time. Your tone of your voice matters a lot to what you actually communicate.
Can you
Well,
repeat
and and on that point, if you've never ever really kind of shaky or anxious about a new place or a fresh idea, then you're not growing. That's always going to
Mm,
be there. That is the
powerful.
best sign that you know that you're hitting the new heights or going into new places. That's natural. It doesn't matter. And I mean, you can hear some of the world's greatest actors, whether they're on stage or on film, they still have stage fright to this day. They just go forth, definitely. I'm sorry,
Powerful.
Sandra. But what?
Well, I wanted Derek to repeat that last phrase because it sounded really important to me, but I didn't hear it all.
So I believe what just to relate back, when you create that space of curiosity, right? Maybe it's through a podcast, maybe it's just by having coffee with somebody. When you're in that space of curiosity, there are a lot of tools that we have available to us. Tone of voice is one of the tools. There are many tools. The topic of the presentation today was types of questions, because that's what I've studied a lot and that's what I've deliberately practiced. But I love that people immediately hopped onto, well, what about the tone of the voice? Because the reality is that I think it's something like 92% of your communication isn't the words you say, it's how you say them. So how you ask a question could literally make the difference between whether or not somebody even thinks you're asking a question to begin with, just based on how you put that tone of your voice.
Exactly. Well, it is 8:02, folks, and we have hit the end of this lovely time. Let's give our speaker one more round of applause to kind of finish it out. Derek, thank you so much. Very, very lively, very educational, and I appreciate getting to know you better in this direction, and I am happy to pass on these things to build up the brand that you're setting up and any of these projects. So we need to share and do what have you, and then again I'll make sure that you have that information out there whenever we edit this. Rhonda, I had one other thing, and I'll say there will always be voices telling you to do what you cannot do. The only voice you need to listen is your own. And so, well, on that point, I will say thank you again, and we'll close this. So the next one, this is the last one for this year. We're going to start the 2026 year off on a bang, doing very Toastmaster specific stuff with Terry Orban, and that's going to be on the 8th of January. So it's going to line up really, really well with contest season for Toastmasters, and will also be some other items out there that other people can utilize to develop, whatever they're doing when it comes to being a contestant. So thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and stop the feed, so that way, we're all good to go and
Just
have
want to thank everybody too, Tim. I want to thank you and thank everybody. It's been fantastic. I appreciate the time.
Good. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm stopping the live stream now, and here we